Hi, this is Bill Binko. I'm co-founder of LessonPix.com. And today I'd like to talk to you about a new project we've just started called AT Makers. AT Makers is trying to bridge the gap between the incredible ability of the STEM programs and robotics teams in our high schools and the incredible need in the assistive technology space. So I think it's worth spending about 1 minute on myself so you have a little bit of background about why I'm doing this. So I am a geek by trade. I was a computer engineering major. I graduated in 1993 from the University of Florida. I spent time in manufacturing space, and then for about 15 or 16 years I worked for a lot of large companies leading teams of software development. So my background is engineering and software. Along the way, I met my wife Lori and married into special education. Now, Lori is a special ed pre-K teacher and works here in Pinellas County still, and also kind of a phenomenal artist. And the two of us created a company called LessonPix that helps teachers create classroom materials, and speech therapists make therapy materials. That's kind of a side note, but it does explain why I got into this. So all of a sudden I found myself working for LessonPix and doing well, but going to assistive technology conferences. Now, for those of you who don't know, assistive technology is things like wheelchairs and crutches, but also speech generating devices, eye gaze machines, switches, switch adapted toys, switch adapted all kinds of things that have been made adapted to meet the needs of a particular person. Now, assistive technology solutions are generally not considered medical. They're not meant to either cure you, they're not meant to help you with a medical condition. They're there to help you do things that are everyday activities. There's something called ADLs, activities for daily living. There are things like walking and speaking. You'll have adapted spoons and things like that. And what I found at these conferences was that the technology there was fairly out of date. I'd say the state of the art right now is somewhere in the mid-90s. And also it was very, very expensive. And there are reasons for this that would be interesting to talk about another time. I find it mainly is how these devices are paid for through bureaucracies and budgets and things like that. But there's a great need among assistive technology providers to be able to get solutions at the point of need, at the point of contact. So even though they may be able to get a speech generating device, to get the right kind of switch for this person, or to be able to adapt this particular toy to teach a skill to a child, is something that they're not going to get funding for, and they certainly don't have time to go through that effort. It's very frustrating for me as an engineer to see something that is infinitely doable, right? It's very doable from a perspective of technology not being done because of bureaucracy and other hazards that are in the way of success. So over time, as my daughter got older, I started working with her on a STEM program at her school, a robotics club, and I realized that the kids in these programs have most of the skills necessary to help people in assistive technology. They can solder, they can do basic circuits, they can do robotics, they can do switches. A lot of these are things that are the stumbling block of assistive technology. There are a couple other stumbling blocks that are worth noting. One is assistive technology and STEM have different vocabularies. A lot of times they have overlapping acronyms, so there is definitely a communication gap there. And that's something that I found that I can help with because I'm kind of in both worlds. So when we talk about assistive technology providers, especially in school districts, a lot of them don't know that STEM clubs exist, or if they know they exist, they think of them in terms of places where kids are learning about technology, and not necessarily a place where people are applying technology and might be able to help them. And that's really the goal with AT Makers, is to bridge that gap, to introduce the STEM teams, the robotics teams, to the people in their same district that are often in the same building or down the hall, and to introduce them to them and to actually show them problems that they can solve today with the skills they have now. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of robotics clubs. I'm a mentor for my daughters. I think that they teach important skills. They teach teamwork and problem solving, and they teach electronics, and they're great for getting skills into the hands of these teens. One of the things they don't do is they don't use the skills that the students have now to actually impact their community today. And that's something that is a real need with these kids. I mean, a lot of the things that they do are contrived, whether that's moving a ball into a basket, whether that's solving whatever problem that the robotics challenge has this year. It is fairly contrived. It's important. And it was contrived in order to teach particular skills. But it's not something that they're going to get a long-term solution in place that is helping another person's life. And so I think this is important. I think it teaches empathy. It teaches gratitude. I think there's a lot that these kids can get out of actually getting into their community, meeting with people who need assistive technology, and then meeting people who are trying to provide it but don't have the skills. On the ATP side, on the assistive technology provider side, what you'll find is they're not really technologists. They're not engineers. They're usually speech pathologists or occupational therapists. They don't have the skill set needed to do the last mile, right? To take that speech generating device and actually mount it in a way that this person can use it, or to get a switch that's wireless and can move farther away, or to take a switch that can only handle a small current and create an isolator so that it can control a larger device like a toy. Those are things that are just beyond them, even though in the STEM community, they're infinitely doable, especially if there's already a guide. This picture behind me is actually one of my last straws. I think this is a great project. So this is a project that came out of Adafruit, which is one of my favorite companies. They took EMG switches, which are small devices that measure current going through a muscle, and they made it so that if they raised their eyebrow, it would send the word "sup" to their friend and back and forth. And I saw this project and I thought, that's really cool, but think of what all the ATs could use if they could have a $37 EMG switch. If they want to get that for their client or their student, they're going to have to spend 6 months going through a trial, prove that it works with the child, and then spend thousands of dollars, or their district will spend thousands of dollars to be able to get a device that is approved. Now, I know those devices are better, and those in the AT community, to those of you who may be watching this, I understand that there's a real cost associated with getting money out of Medicare or getting it out of other budgets, but if this tool will work, if this $37 tool is good enough for this use, certainly we should be trying to do it. And this was one of my last straws. It was the thing that actually said to me, you know what, you should start something, get out there, introduce this to the robotics teams, introduce this to the STEM programs and the maker community, and that's what we've started. So over the past few months, we've done some great pilot programs with local high schools. So I'd like to show you a couple of the outreach programs, some of the benefits that these kids saw, and maybe give you some inspiration on understanding what we're trying to do. First, we worked with Go Baby Go, which is a project out of the University of Delaware, to switch adapt some cars. And we worked with University of Florida and folks here at CCC High School, and we adapted cars for a couple students that are in actually Lori's class, my wife's class. We did 12-volt cars instead of 6-volt cars. We used some relays to do that. And it was really motivating to see these kids work directly with the impacted students. So these 4- and 5-year-old kids came in, we fitted them for the cars, we adapted them to meet their needs. One of them has cerebral palsy, the other has both cerebral palsy and Down syndrome. And it was great to see these kids, the high school students, not just building something that was going to be used by these younger kids, but also to be actually interacting with them. So one of my favorite pictures is of one of the high school students sitting down and just playing with this 4-year-old boy with Down syndrome, and they're pushing a swing. Well, that doesn't help them as far as robotics goes, but it does help them in terms of empathy and growth and understanding that they're very lucky to be in the situation they are. And also understanding that these kids, even though they've got these massive physical challenges, are just kids. And sometimes they just want to play. And the best way you can help them is to get involved in their life and to actually play with them. Another outreach program was to go into the home of an adult with cerebral palsy and to use what's currently out there in the commercial marketplace to add home automation. So one of our students went out, he put in a Nest thermostat, he installed Amazon Alexa, he taught it to understand this person's speech, which was difficult, and it was kind of magic. We have a video that I'll show in a second of this young man, very proud that this person can now control a little bit of his own life. by talking to Amazon Echo.
Echo, what would the weather be on Monday?
On Monday, August 1st in Newport Richey, you'll see some sun and thunderstorms, and can expect a high of 91 and a low of 77. August 1st in Newport Richey, you'll see some sun and thunderstorms, and can expect a high of 91 and a low of 77.
Here you'll see the tools that he used to do this. You see him there putting in a thermostat, setting up if this then that, which is an online service for controlling things based on events that occur. And finally, a colorific bulb. It's a color bulb that sits in this gentleman's room and can be controlled from his phone. Now, none of these are dangerous. None of these are going to burn people's fingers. You don't have to learn to solder. And if you ask your teen, can you install a couple apps and hook up 4 wires to a thermostat, most of them are going to say yes. A lot of them don't think about it. People with cerebral palsy are generally invisible, and it is a good thing for them to be able to reach out into their community and do something with the skills they have right now. For this last effort, we worked with a gentleman in Maryland whose son has SMA type 1. We created remote switches. So these are standard AT switches that control devices. But by allowing him to not have the cord between the 2 endpoints, it allowed his son to play with something that is farther away. In this case, it was a bubble blower that the kids at the high school had adapted. He had it across the way outside so that he could stay in the shade and everybody could play. And Jonathan was good enough to send down a video, which I'll show you a part of right now.
Hi, Jonathan Lasko here. I'm very excited to show you the new setup that Bill Benko and the team from AT Makers helped put together for my son Max. This is a wireless AT switch created from a garage door opener receiver and transmitter pair. An AT switch that is extremely sensitive. It takes less than 10 grams of pressure, and it's connected to this little garage door opener. Here is a switch adapted bubble blower unit. See, there's a little battery pack that powers the receiver. Look, Ma, no wires. Blow the bubbles.
Uncle John's waiting. Back up, back up, back up. Yeah! You big one!
Nice. Show us how you blow the bubbles. Nice.
Really good at that. Only a taste.
So as far as what skills were needed for that project, there is some light soldering. You have to be able to solder leads onto the switch jacks. That was actually our project this year to teach them soldering. Rather than just teaching them practicing soldering, we actually did that. We created a whole lot of small switch jacks so that later projects that were switch adapting toys, we already had the jacks ready to go. The remainder of it was cracking open a small car remote so that they could use the inside of that as the transmitter. The receiver was already ready to go. We just had to wire it up. The kids were great at doing this, and then Jonathan actually replicated the process in Maryland with a group that he's working with up there. Okay, so what are we going to provide to you to make this possible, and what are we asking you guys to do? We have a set of guides we're developing at atmakers.org. We also have a very active atmakers.org group on Facebook where we discuss things. So the process is basically people come to the group from the AT community. They'll say, hey, I've got a problem. I need to adapt this toy. Does anybody have any idea how to do it? We'll find a maker, either pair them with them, or one of the leaders of the group will actually walk through how to do this. And then along the way, we'll create a guide so that the next time somebody asks for My Pal Violet or My Pal Scout, there's already a guide on how to do that customization. Once that's done and the video is made, we'll actually make a step-by-step guide. We'll put it up on AT Makers. It'll have the parts you need. It'll also have things like what are the skill sets, what is the level of effort for this, how long should it take, and things like that. Now, we expect these guides will be used by STEM programs, maker groups, individuals who are makers, to then go out into their community and bring this to their ATs. If you are an assistive technology professional and you're actually coming to us looking for help, we'll try to pair you up with an AT maker in your area. A lot of times people don't realize that in their same school program, in their same building, there is a 3D printer. There are students who know how to use it and don't have a lot of uses for it. This is a great, 3D printers are magic for assistive technologists and they have no clue how to use them. So it's a great way to get the ATs to understand what is an Arduino, what is a Raspberry Pi, how might I use that in order to assist these people. So we have guides on their sides as well. Students, on the other hand, have a different set of challenges. Very often they've never spoken to somebody with a disability. They don't know to presume competence. They don't know to speak to the person and not their interpreter. They've never spoken to somebody using a device. And a lot of them are scared or intimidated or uncomfortable. So we are developing right now guides on how to do those things, which might be just as important. We do feel this is our mission, right? Our tagline is helping makers help others. That means both sides need to gain some knowledge about what the other has to give and what the other needs. Now, some of you may be wondering how to sell this to your students if you're a STEM coordinator. It's not that hard. There's actually a couple of really important things to tell them. First, this is great for your essay, right? If you're writing up a college essay and you can say, I helped Joey speak, instead of I helped the rotocopter fly upside down, that's a big thing. You're not going to be able to help him create a switch if you're not also involved in robotics and STEM. But it's a great way to make something real, and it makes something that is understandable to people who aren't necessarily technologists. AT Makers is 100% nonprofit, and it is filing for our 501c3. By the time you see this, it will likely be in place. But we can certainly provide proof of service hours if it's local. We can provide coordination if you need that. For example, here in Florida, we have scholarship programs that require service hours. And these are service hours that the kids aren't going to hate doing because they're going to learn skills that they're going to apply in their own life. The last thing to tell them is this is an industry that is ready to be disrupted. Somebody's going to come into the assistive technology space and bring open source hardware and bring things like that to this space, and it's going to kind of blow it apart. Within the next 5 or 10 years, there's going to be a massive disruption in AT. These kids are going to be coming of age when that happens, and I'd love to see one of these kids, one of these young adults, be the next person who comes in and creates a solution for these people that is magical. We're also acting as an AT liaison between the STEM programs and a group called ATIA, the Assistive Technology Industry Association. So they've been good enough to actually invite any groups that are making materials for this to present at their conference in February. It's either the last week in January or the first week in February every year. I'm not sure this year. But we are actually honored to do that. We're going to have some people from Florida, and if any others would like to come down or remotely send what they've done, we'll present that. It's a great opportunity for the kids to actually see an AT conference. They'll get at full attendance. They can go to the sessions if they'd like to. So if you get people who are really into this, it's a great stepping stone in getting them a career that they may actually want to do long term. So what do we need from you? Well, first, we need you to get involved. We want you to join us on the Facebook group. Have your students join as well. It is a teen-friendly environment. We also need adults. We need people to help chaperone if people do go to ATIA. We need people to help put the guides together, run the WordPress site. We have some needs of actual involvement at an administrative level as well. But from a day-to-day STEM program, we want your students to learn about this. So show them this video, show them some of the guides, ask if they want to get involved. And then if you don't already know the assistive technology providers in your school district, ask. If you call the school district and say, who's in charge of AT, they're going to point you at somebody who will absolutely be able to see this, see the value of it, and be able to point you to people who need your help. Once you've done that, please bring those stories back to us. We love hearing about them, we love showcasing them on the site, and we look forward to what you're doing. So I want to thank you for your time and your attention, and I hope you do get involved. If you need anything from us, please let us know. bill@atmakers.org would reach me. Also, please join the Facebook group and just tell us your story. Tell us where you are, how many people are in your group, what you want to do. Whether you need help or are willing to give it, by all means, just let us know. We look forward to working with you.